The stadium was shaking. Over 50,000 people screaming, lights flashing like lightning, guitars screaming, even louder than the crowd. This was supposed to be just another legendary night. Another sold-out concert. Another unforgettable performance by Ozzy Osbourne. And then, everything stopped. The music cut off mid. Note, the lights froze. The crowd went silent, confused, restless. Ozzy Osbourne stood still at the center of the stage, gripping the microphone but not singing. No music, no shouting. Just silence. People thought it was a technical issue. Some booed, some laughed nervously. But Ozzy wasn't looking at the band. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was staring at one small spot near the front. A child, a tiny 12-year-old boy wrapped in an oversized hoodie sitting in a wheelchair. A hospital bracelet still around his wrist. His body looked fragile, almost swallowed by the seat. But his eyes were locked on the stage like this was the most important moment of his life. Security tried to move him back. Ozzy raised his hand. Stop. One word. That's all it took. The entire stadium fell into complete silence. People leaned forward. Something was happening, and everyone could feel it in their chest. Ozzy stepped closer to the edge of the stage, squinting through the lights. "How old are you, kid?" he asked softly. The boy's voice was weak, barely reaching the mic. 12. Ozzy swallowed hard. "What's your name?" "Daniel." A pause. Then Ozzy asked a question no one expected. "How long you got, Daniel?" The crowd gasped. Daniel's mother covered her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. The boy hesitated, then answered. "Not long." You could hear people crying now, grown adult strangers, rock fans who came for loud music and chaos, suddenly standing in absolute stillness. Ozzy turned away for a second, his back to the crowd. When he turned back, his eyes were glassy. "Listen to me," he said, his voice cracking. "This concert can wait." And with that, one of the biggest rock concerts in the world stopped. Not for fame, not for money, not for publicity, but for a dying 12-year-old boy. And what Ozzy did next broke every heart inside that stadium. Daniel wasn't supposed to be there. Doctors had said it clearly. Crowds were dangerous. Loud noise could exhaust him, and long nights were risky. His body was already fighting a battle most adults couldn't survive. Tubes, treatments, hospital rooms. That had become his world. But Daniel had one wish. Not Disneyland, not toys, not even a miracle cure. He wanted to see Ozzy Osbourne live. For years, Ozzy's music had been Daniel's escape. When the pain was unbearable, when the nights felt endless, his father would play old rock songs quietly beside the hospital bed. Daniel didn't understand all the lyrics, but he felt them, the anger, the pain, the survival. Ozzy's voice made him feel strong when his body wasn't. When his condition worsened, doctors gently asked the parents if there was anything Daniel still wanted. His mother hesitated, afraid to say it out loud, like speaking the wish would remind everyone how little time was left. But Daniel smiled. "I want to hear Ozzy sing, just once, for real." His parents tried. They emailed. They called. They begged event organizers, charities. Anyone who would listen. Most replies were polite but empty. Until one message came back. 2 tickets front, access clearance, special permission. On the night of the concert, the stadium lights looked like stars to him. The noise didn't scare him, it thrilled him. For the first time in months, he wasn't a patient. He wasn't the sick kid. He was just a fan. Security escorted them carefully through the crowd. Some people stared, some smiled, some looked away, uncomfortable with the reminder that life isn't fair. Daniel didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on the stage. Backstage, Ozzy Osbourne was preparing, like he always did. The makeup, the leather coat, the ritual before the chaos. But something felt off. Maybe it was instinct. Just before walking on stage, a staff member mentioned it casually. "There's a kid out there, real sick, big fan." Ozzy nodded, distracted. He'd heard stories like that before. Then the show began. The first song exploded through the stadium. The crowd roared. Ozzy moved like the legend he was. Raw, loud, unstoppable. For a moment, everything was normal. But between songs, Ozzy's eyes scanned the front rows, and that's when he saw him. Small, still, pale, surrounded by noise, yet strangely fragile. A child who looked like he didn't belong in a place this loud, or in a world this cruel. Ozzy missed a beat. He leaned forward, squinting. That hospital bracelet caught the light. Something twisted in his chest. As the next song began, Ozzy tried to focus, but his eyes kept drifting back to Daniel, to the way the boy clutched the armrest, like he was holding on to the moment itself. By the time the song ended, Ozzy knew. This wasn't just another concert, and Daniel wasn't just another fan. That's when Ozzy raised his hand, and the music stopped. The silence was unbearable. 50,000 people stood frozen, unsure if they were allowed to breathe. The lights dimmed slightly, as if even they didn't want to interrupt the moment. Ozzy Osbourne stood at the edge of the stage, staring at Daniel. Up close, it was worse. The boy's cheeks were hollow. His hands looked too small for the armrests of the wheelchair. The hospital bracelet glowed under the stage lights like a cruel reminder that this wasn't just a fan interaction. This was something far heavier. Ozzy crouched down. "What brings you here tonight, mate?" he asked gently. Daniel swallowed. His mother leaned closer, ready to speak for him. But Daniel shook his head. "I wanted to come," he said softly. Before I can't." That sentence hit the stadium like a punch to the chest. Ozzy didn't respond right away. He looked up briefly, blinking hard, then back at Daniel. He asked, his voice lower now. The mother couldn't hold back anymore. "We don't know exactly," she whispered, tears running freely. "Days, maybe weeks." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some people put their hands over their mouths, others dropped their phones, suddenly ashamed for recording. Daniel kept his eyes on Ozzy. "I'm not scared," he said. "I just didn't want to miss this." For a moment, Ozzy forgot where he was. No cameras, no fans, no stage. Just a child, braver than most adults, facing the truth head. Ozzy stood up slowly and turned away from the crowd again. He walked a few steps, pacing, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't part of the show. There was no script for this. No right thing to say. The band members watched silently, unsure whether to step in or step back. Security looked panicked. Promoters whispered urgently off stage. Time was money, schedules mattered. But none of that mattered now. Ozzy turned back, walked to the microphone, and spoke, not as a rock legend, but as a man. "You know," he said, "people think concerts are about noise, about madness, about losing control." He paused, looking straight at Daniel, "But sometimes they're about holding on." The crowd listened like this was a confession meant only for them. Ozzy knelt again, eye level with the boy. "Daniel," he said quietly, "what song do you want to hear?" Daniel hesitated, surprised. That's okay," he said quickly. "You don't have to." "No," Ozzy interrupted gently. "I want to." Daniel thought for a second, then smiled. A real smile, the kind that fights through pain. "Mama, I'm coming home." Ozzy closed his eyes. That song wasn't just music. It was regret. It was forgiveness. It was goodbye. The band felt it too. Without a word, the guitarist adjusted his strap. The drummer rolled his shoulders. No cues, no countdown. Just understanding. Before the first note played, Ozzy raised the mic one last time. "This one," he said, voice breaking, "is for the bravest kid I've ever met." The opening chords filled the stadium, softer than usual, slower, almost fragile. Daniel's hands trembled as the sound washed over him. His mother collapsed into tears beside him, holding his shoulder like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. Ozzy sang differently now. Not loud, not wild. Every word was deliberate. Every note felt like it was being handed to Daniel personally. Halfway through the song, Ozzy stepped off the stage. Security moved instantly, alarmed, but Ozzy waved them off. He walked straight to Daniel. The crowd held their breath. Ozzy knelt beside the wheelchair and sang the chorus directly to him. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't look away. He mouthed the words, even when his voice failed. For those few minutes, the world shrank. No illness, no fear, no countdown, just music and a child who finally got his wish. But what no one knew, not Ozzy, not the crowd, not even Daniel himself, was that this moment would become more than just a memory. It would become a goodbye. The song ended, but no one clapped. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it felt wrong to break the moment. Ozzy stayed kneeling beside Daniel, the microphone lowered, his head slightly bowed. The final note still echoed through the stadium, hanging in the air like something sacred. 50,000 people stood in absolute silence, united by a feeling none of them expected to feel at a rock concert. Daniel exhaled slowly, like the music had taken the last bit of strength he had left. His mother noticed first. His shoulders slumped. His grip loosened. His eyes fluttered. "Daniel," she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. Ozzy looked up immediately. Daniel smiled faintly. "I'm tired," he said. Those two words shattered his parents. Ozzy stood quickly, waving toward the side of the stage. Medics rushed forward, their faces serious, professional. But tense, the crowd began to murmur now. Fear replacing awe, Daniel's father stood frozen, unsure whether to move closer or give space. Years of hospitals had trained him for moments like this, and yet nothing ever prepared you. The medic checked Daniel's pulse, then looked up. "We need to take him backstage now." Ozzy placed a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You did great, champ," he said softly. "You were amazing." Daniel looked up at him one last time. "Thank you," he whispered. "I can hear it, even now." The medics carefully turned the wheelchair and began moving quickly toward the exit. Ozzy walked beside them, ignoring the stage, the lights, the screaming promoters asking what was happening. For the crowd, time slowed. Some people prayed, some cried openly. Some simply watched, knowing they were witnessing something they would carry forever. Backstage felt cold compared to the warmth of the stadium. Daniel was laid gently on a medical bed. Machines beeped softly. His breathing was shallow now, each breath more effort than the last. His mother held his hand with both of hers. "Stay with me," she begged. "Please." Ozzy stood a few steps away, silent. This wasn't his world. He couldn't sing this pain away. Fame meant nothing here. A medic pulled the parents aside, speaking quietly. Ozzy didn't need to hear the words to understand. This wasn't good. Minutes passed. Daniel's eyes opened again, unfocused but searching. Ozzy stepped closer instinctively. "Hey," he said gently. "I'm here." Daniel's lips curved into the smallest smile. "I knew you'd be nice," he whispered. Ozzy laughed softly through tears. "You've got good instincts, kid." Daniel's breathing slowed. The room felt impossibly small now, like the walls were closing in. The monitors beeping spaced out. Longer. Longer. And then, a flat sound. Silence. The medic checked again, then slowly looked at Daniel's parents and shook his head. Daniel's mother let out a sound that didn't sound human. His father wrapped his arms around her, his own face collapsing under the weight of it. Ozzy turned away, not because he didn't care, but because the tears finally won. Out in the stadium, the crowd waited, unaware of what had just happened. The band stood frozen, instruments hanging uselessly from their shoulders. After several minutes, Ozzy returned to the stage alone. No music, no theatrics, no rock star swagger. Just a man. He stepped up to the microphone, took a deep breath, and spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said quietly, "we just lost a very special soul tonight." The stadium went silent again. A brave boy named Daniel came here to hear music, and he gave us something far greater in return. His voice cracked. He reminded us what matters. People cried openly now. Strangers held hands. Phones were lowered, forgotten. "This concert is over," Ozzy said. "But what happened tonight? Don't let it end here." He looked out over the crowd one last time. "Go home, hug your kids, call the people you love, and never forget time is the most precious thing we have." Ozzy set the microphone down and walked off the stage. No encore, no applause. Just a stadium full of people forever changed. By the time the stadium lights went out, the story had already escaped. Phones that were once raised for selfies were now shaking in trembling hands. Videos uploaded without captions. Clips shared without context. A rock concert that suddenly ended. A child in a wheelchair. A song sung on his knees. And then the truth followed. 12-year-old boy dies after Ozzy Osbourne pauses concert. Ozzy Osbourne's final song for a dying child. The night music stood still. Within hours, the footage was everywhere. People who had never listened to Ozzy Osbourne were watching the video in silence. Parents stopped mid-scroll and stared at their screens. Comment sections filled with broken hearts, candle emojis, and one sentence repeated again and again. I wasn't ready for this. News channels replayed the moment Ozzy knelt beside Daniel. They slowed down the clip where Daniel mouthed the lyrics. They zoomed in on Ozzy's face. The moment the legend disappeared and the human remained. Journalists searched for details. Who was the boy? How sick was he? Did Ozzy know he was dying? Daniel's parents didn't speak at first. They couldn't. Their world had collapsed quietly in a backstage room, while 50,000 people waited outside. Grief doesn't move at internet speed. But when they finally released a short statement, it broke people even more. Daniel passed away peacefully, hearing the song he loved. He wasn't afraid. He was happy. That sentence alone was shared millions of times. Fans left flowers outside the stadium the next morning. Candles lined the gates. Handwritten notes appeared. From strangers who never met Daniel but somehow felt like they knew him. I'll hug my son tighter tonight. My daughter is 12. Ozzy Osbourne didn't post anything. No tribute video, no statement, no carefully worded caption. For 2 days, silence. Then quietly, a single image appeared on his official page. No filters. No branding. Just a photo of a backstage pass. Daniel's name written on it. Underneath, one line, sing loud wherever you are, mate. The post exploded, millions of likes. Hundreds of thousands of comments. People sharing their own stories, sick children, last wishes, moments they never forgot. Other artists spoke up. He showed us what being a legend really means. That wasn't a concert. That was humanity. But the most powerful moment came days later. Daniel's parents were invited back to the empty stadium. No cameras, no crowd, just silence. Ozzy met them privately. He didn't talk much. He hugged them. He listened. Then he handed them something. A framed lyric sheet. Handwritten. From Mama, I'm coming home. At the bottom, Ozzy had written, Daniel sang this with me. I'll never sing it the same way again. From that night on, Ozzy changed the song. Every time he performed it, he paused. Every time the lights dimmed. Every time one empty spotlight shone near the front of the stage. Fans learned what it meant without being told. That one's for Daniel. Charities noticed. Donations surged for children with terminal illnesses. Make-A-Wish organizations reported record engagement. Parents started sharing stories of artists who showed up when it mattered. Not for cameras, not for headlines, but because they could. What began as a paused concert became a movement. A reminder that kindness doesn't need permission. And somewhere in all that noise, one quiet truth remained. Daniel didn't just get his wish. He changed how millions of people saw time, music, and each other. But the most heartbreaking part, Ozzy Osbourne later admitted something that few people knew. That night, Daniel wasn't the only one saying goodbye. After the headlines faded, the hashtags slowed, and the world moved on to the next story. Ozzy Osbourne didn't. The tour continued, because contracts don't pause for grief. Cities changed. Hotels blurred together. Crowds still screamed his name like nothing had happened. But something had. Backstage, Ozzy was quieter. Less jokes, less chaos. People who had worked with him for years noticed it immediately. Before shows, he used to blast music, pace the room, hype himself up. Now he sat longer, sometimes holding the same folded piece of paper in his pocket, Daniel's name written in marker on the old backstage pass. No one asked about it. Some things felt too sacred. Every night before Mama, I'm coming home. Ozzy paused, just a second longer than usual. Enough to breathe, enough to remember. And every night, he saw Daniel again, not sick, not fragile, just smiling. In interviews, journalists tried to ask, "Did that night change you? Was it the hardest moment of your career?" Ozzy waved it off. "It wasn't about me," he said. It never was, but privately, he admitted something to his wife that he hadn't said out loud before. "I think he waited," Ozzy whispered one night, sitting on the edge of the bed. Like he just needed that one thing, and then he was done. There was guilt in his voice. Not regret. Guilt, the kind that comes from knowing you were part of someone's final moments. Weeks later, a small package arrived at Ozzy's home. No return address. Inside was a drawing, crayon lines, uneven shapes, a stick figure holding a microphone, another in a wheelchair beside him. Above it, written carefully, "Best night ever." Ozzy stared at it for a long time. Then he framed it. He placed it somewhere no fans ever saw, not on a wall of awards, not near gold records, but in a quiet room where he went when the noise became too much. He never spoke publicly about that room, but people close to him knew. That was where he went to remember who he was, beyond the stage. At the final show of the tour, as Ozzy finished the last chorus of Mama, I'm Coming Home, the crowd stayed silent. Just like that night, no one clapped. No one shouted. Thousands of phone lights rose together. Ozzy looked out, confused at first. Then he understood. Simone near the front held a sign, "For Daniel." Ozzy's hands trembled. He didn't sing. And because of that, he showed everyone what truly matters. Ozzy Osbourne could have kept singing. He could have let security handle it. He could have stayed the legend on stage and never stepped down. But he chose to pause. He chose to see the human in front of him. Not a fan, not a child, not a tragedy, but a soul. That choice echoed louder than any guitar ever could, because legends aren't defined by how loudly the crowd screams their name. They're defined by what they do when no one asks them to. Daniel's story reminds us that kindness doesn't need an audience. Compassion doesn't need applause, and humanity doesn't need permission. Sometimes the smallest person in the room carries the biggest lesson. A 12-year-old boy, barely strong enough to sit upright, reminded millions of adults what courage looks like. Not the loud kind, not the fearless kind, the quiet kind, the kind that shows up even when you're hurting, the kind that smiles even when you're tired, the kind that says, "I'm not scared," when the world expects you to be. Daniel didn't change the world by living a long life. He changed it by living an honest one. And Ozzy Osbourne didn't become a legend that night because he sang perfectly. He became one because he listened. If this story made you stop scrolling, if it made your chest feel heavy, if it reminded you of someone you love, don't ignore that feeling. Call someone, hold someone, forgive someone, because time doesn't wait for us to be ready. And if there's one thing Daniel gave us, it's this: love loudly, respect quietly, and never underestimate the power of showing up, even for a moment. If this story touched your heart, type in the comments. If you believe kindness is real strength, type respect. And tell me, where are you watching from? Because somewhere out there, someone needs to know they're not alone.